A very good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Victoria Memorial Hall, to this inaugural event of the Victoria Memorial Hall Exeter University, or Exeter in general collaboration. A memorandum of understanding has been signed today between these two parties, as it were, about which you will hear a little bit more from our Secretary and Curator, Dr. Jayanta Sengupta. We have assembled here, of course, for an illustrated lecture on nature surveyed. And before we get going, I would like to request the key protagonists up on the stage. So may I request Sir Steve Smith, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Exeter, to please take his place on the dais. And may I also request the three presenters for this evening, Andrew Rudd, please come up please, and Nandini Chatterjee and Holly Morganroth of Royal Albert Memorial Museum, Exeter, to please take their seats on the dais. Yeah, I would now like to request Dr. Jayanta Sengupta to give his welcome address on this occasion. Jayanta, would you please?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's lecture, Nature Surveyed: How Colonial Officials and Indian Artists in 18th Century Bengal Shaped How We See the Natural World. To be given by Professors Andrew Rudd and Nandini Chatterjee of the University of Exeter and Holly Morganroth of the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter. Today, as we have just heard, is a very significant day for us because this afternoon we signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the University of Exeter, beginning a collaboration that over the next few years will lead to a jointly curated exhibition in 2020, tentatively titled The Garden of Empire, which will bring together the natural history collections of the Victoria Memorial Hall, which is essentially the John Fleming collection of zoological paintings, and the historic Royal Albert Memorial Museum's collection of the Richard Creswell collection of botanical paintings. It will also lead, among other things, to seminars and publications. And it is a privilege and honor for all of us to have the Honorable Vice-Chancellor of the University of Exeter, Professor Sir Steve Smith, to come all the way from Exeter to be personally present here to sign the Memorandum of Understanding with us this afternoon. We are deeply grateful to you, Sir Steve, for your leadership and initiative to bring the idea of this collaboration to reality, and for bringing your colleagues who have been instrumental to this collaboration project. Professor Andrew Thorpe, Vice-Chancellor, the College of Humanities, the University of Exeter, and other colleagues, James Smith of the Institute of Global Partnerships in the University of Exeter, and also others. It's also an honor for us to have Mrs. Smith to be present here with us tonight. It's a privilege and honor to have all of you in our midst tonight, and on behalf of everybody in the Victoria Memorial Hall, we convey our sincerest thanks and gratitude to you. Now to turn to tonight's three speakers, Andrew, Nandini, and Holly, who are friends, colleagues, and fellow collaborators on a venture that has already begun and was merely formalized by the Memorandum of Understanding signed earlier today. The idea of this collaboration began last year with a visit by Nandini to Kolkata, and also during the first of my two trips to Exeter, where it was my absolute privilege to see the glorious collection of 19th century botanical drawings in the collection of Richard Creswell, impeccably conserved thanks to Holly Morganroth, who showed me the collection with immense care and pride. It is her enthusiasm and initiative that brought this collection in the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter within the ambit of this collaboration. Thank you so very much, Holly. And in Andrew and Nandini, we have the two most incisive minds that are now at work on the fascinating research questions that drive the research project and the exhibition. During a previous visit to the Victoria Memorial Hall, the three of them, Andrew, Nandini, and Holly, were truly excited to see our own John Fleming collection of zoological drawings and came up with questions that they are pursuing indefatigably during this trip And I'm sure some of these questions will come up for discussion in their talk tonight. That's all I have to say for this moment. It's truly exciting for all of us to begin this collaboration that will bring several good things over the next few years. So please keep watching this space. I thank all our guests from the University of Exeter and the Royal Albert Memorial Museum, Exeter, for their enthusiasm and initiative. All my colleagues in the Victoria Memorial Hall who have readily shared this enthusiasm. All friends in the media that have responded to this collaboration so positively. And to all of you, longtime friends, colleagues, fellow citizens, including the alumni of the University of Exeter, for your support. We'll continue to bank on this support in the years to come. Thank you very much. And I will now request the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University of Exeter, Professor Sir Steve Smith, to kindly share his thoughts on this moment and on this collaboration. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Sir Steve Smith.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sengupta, for your extremely kind introduction. It's a real honor for me and my colleagues from Exeter to have the opportunity to speak in this absolutely beautiful and historic location. I'd like to start by welcoming all the guests attending this evening's event. It's a great pleasure to see representatives from the British Council, the Victoria Memorial Hall's trustees, and several of our academic friends from West Bengal, alongside some Exeter alumni and so many people from the general public. I very much hope that you enjoy the evening, and I hope to have the opportunity to meet more of you after the talk has finished. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, I just want to say a few words about the reason that the University of Exeter has visited this fabulous museum today. Alongside our valued partners in the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and Art Gallery in Exeter, Exeter academics have been working with colleagues at the Victoria Memorial Hall for some time now on an exciting new research project to curate and collate collections of 18th and 19th century paintings of natural subjects, specifically birds, animals, and plants from South Asia. This is now the subject of a major joint research grant application. This collaboration will aim to produce a new digital exhibition and a range of teaching and research tools to broaden access to those important collections. As Dr. Sengupta said, he and I today signed a new memorandum of understanding between our institutions today. The key point here is this is not only to support this valuable project, it's also to allow us to explore new opportunities for us to work together in the future. The University of Exeter is proud to be home of one of the UK's largest and most diverse groups of scholars working on South Asia. We have one of the top 5 humanities groupings in the UK. And so it's a genuine pleasure for me to introduce 2 of them to you today. Dr. Nandini Chatterjee, based in our history department, is the head of Exeter's South Asia Research Centre. Dr. Andrew Rudd is Director of Education in our English department. They are joined by Holly Morganrath, a Collections Officer at the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and Art Gallery in Exeter. Tonight, they're each going to give you a brief insight into their research project. So without any further ado, except to say how much I personally am proud to be here and to inaugurate this collaboration, I would like to invite them to begin their talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sengupta. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, for your generous introductions. And thank you all for being here. A very warm welcome. We hope you enjoy what we've got to say. We're going to sort of pass between us as the talk progresses, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions afterwards. So as we talk, please do sort of jot down any thoughts you may have that you could put to us afterwards. So, surveying nature. Today, there have never been more opportunities to look at nature up close and as part of a bigger global picture. The public appetite for looking at nature has never been greater. This was shown by the phenomenal success of nature documentaries such as on the Discovery Channel and the BBC's Blue Planet series screened in 2001 and 2017. These programs were seen by millions of viewers in 50 countries. You can see from the juxtaposition of images here, which is a screenshot from one of the episodes, and the logo of the recent series, that the program promises both microscopic familiarity with the non-human world, combined with a grand narrative of life on Earth, considered as a whole. This is a very human way of trying to make sense of nature. Now, our lecture this evening will return repeatedly to this question of how minute detail fits into a broader canvas when we survey nature. So, how close should we get to nature? This National Geographic India blog post shows wild animals stumbling upon a camera trap triggering a portrait. We can enjoy the wide-eyed wonderment of this leopard cub. It is such an appealing and recognizable response. It is almost as if this was a human child. Now, camera traps serve a serious conservation purpose, but this close encounter reminds us of two things that the lecture will go on to explore. One, the ever-present temptation to understand nature, the non-human world, in terms of the human world. And two, that by looking so minutely at such a creature, even by using the name leopard, we are pulling this creature into a human pattern of understanding. It is inevitable, perhaps, but we should think critically about what we are doing when we do it. Now, the nature writer, the British nature writer, the late Richard Mabey, had words to say about how nature programs are implicated in all this. And he points the finger of blame first at technology, and second at the historical period that we are going to talk about tonight, the 18th century. Let me read you this extract from an article he wrote for the UK newspaper The Guardian back in 2003. The title of the article is, very tellingly, Nature's Voyeurs. There are already endoscopes available to cram down the nest holes of mining bees and wind tunnels to put hapless flying creatures more visibly through their paces. Before long, I expect, micro cameras will be grafted into peregrine falcons' breasts, under a light anesthetic, of course, no cruelty allowed these days, so that viewers can share the experience of a stoop, the dive, as if technical wizardry could ever enable one creature to share the consciousness of another. And he goes on. They remind me of the reckless knowledge vandals of the Age of Enlightenment, and especially of William Derham, who proclaimed in his influential Physico-Theology, a work published in 1711, and this is a quote, "Let us ransack all the globe. Let us with the greatest accuracy inspect every part thereof. Search out the innermost secrets of any of the creatures. Pry into them with all our microscopes and most exquisite instruments, till we find them to bear testimony to their infinite workman." And if we turn back the clock just a few decades to the late 18th century, we find the English Romantic poet, one of my very favorites, William Wordsworth, writing this: "Sweet is the law which nature brings. Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms of things. We murder to dissect. Our meddling intellect misshapes, and we murder to dissect." From roughly the same time, another favorite writer and artist of mine, William Blake. This picture on the screen shows the great scientist Isaac Newton, who normally wore more clothes than this, I should add, drawing abstract shapes with scientific instruments on a piece of paper on the right. His back is turned to the infinite variety and beauty of the coral reef. Very literally, he is showing nature his behind. Now, Richard Mabey, William Wordsworth, and William Blake are all pointing the finger at a form of thought associated with the European Enlightenment, a philosophical movement which aimed to achieve systematic understanding of, and its critics would say, mastery over, the natural world. Here on the screen is another leading figure who plays a direct part in our story this evening. This is the great Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus, here painted in 1737. Now, Linnaeus, as you may know, created the system of classification which we still use, broadly speaking, to name and organize the natural world. And in his major work, published in 1735, he divided living things into 5 categories. The first were called kingdoms: animal, vegetable, mineral, plant. 2 classes, 3 orders, 4 what he called genera, like a genre, and 5 individual species. So if you follow Linnaeus, if you want to name an individual species, you combine its genus, the second last category, usually a Latin name, with a description of it. And 2 famous examples, of course, are Homo sapiens, homo meaning man, sapiens meaning wise, which apparently distinguishes us from all other types of the category. Or Felis domestica, a cat domestic, describes a house cat. And according to Linnaeus, you can describe any living thing on Earth using this binomial, this 2-name system. Now, if you classify all living things in this way, it's possible to produce a not very visually engaging table like this. Here is the animal kingdom according to Carl Linnaeus. You don't need to pay too much attention to the fine detail of this, but basically left to right, we have quadrupeds, birds, amphibians, insects, and worms. Anything that Linnaeus couldn't fit in anywhere else, he put into worms for some reason. It was called his dustbin class for categorization. And you may view this either as an impossible abstraction of exactly the kind that Blake is satirizing in his image of Newton, alive to the theory of nature but dead to its beautiful inner truth, or you may see it as an infinitely versatile system for comprehending all non-human life on Earth, in a form that allows it to be easily shared among scientists everywhere. After all, as I said, with minor changes, this is the system broadly in use globally today. And it was Linnaeus who trained the European naturalists who came to India with the colonial training companies in the 18th century. Now, indulge me for a moment. Imagine you are a European naturalist who came to India in the late 18th century, and you were faced with a mangrove forest such as this here in the Sundarbans. This is what is in front of your eyes. You've learned your Linnaeus. What do you call this stuff? Where do you go from here? You haven't seen it before. So, this is what you would do. You work your way through Linnaeus' system. You find out what kingdom the mangrove belongs to. It belongs to the plant kingdom. It belongs to an order. This is very small script here. Malpighiales. You know it belongs to that. You know it belongs to a family called Rhizoforaceae. And you know it's a mangrove, which in Latin is called Caryopsis. But what sort of mangrove is it? If you are newly discovering this for the first time, that is up to you. And you can have some fun with it, as this little plant is doing on the right. One such naturalist who came to India is a major figure in our research project. This is William Roxburgh, originally from Scotland, who worked for the East India Company as one of their official botanists. And he became a very distinguished man. We'll talk a bit more about him as we go on. But in homage to him, another naturalist named that mangrove that I've just shown you, took the Latin Caryopsis, a mangrove, and named it after the man he admired, Caryopsis roxburghiana, as it is still called to this day. So, taking a European name, possibly even your own name, you come to India and you stamp that name on the Indian plant, if you like, as is the case with Careops roxburghiana here. Now, Roxburgh brings us to this city, to Kolkata, where he ran the botanic gardens across the Hooghly River. The botanic gardens are still open today, and I imagine a great many of you will have been there. It is, of course, home of the world's largest banyan trees. Many people have been reminding me this evening. Here is a beautiful painting showing the gardens as they were in the year 1826. This was a year when people in the city still largely traveled around by boat. So everything in the city is facing the river because that is where people would have seen it from. And on the left is the house that Roxburgh built for himself. It's quite a large house, and in fact his bosses, the East India Company, told him off for spending too much money on it, but it was too late, it was already built. And this is the house, this is a little bit dark, but this is the house as it is today. And we took this photograph when the three of us visited the Botanic Garden earlier in March this year. Incidentally, we understand that the Scottish government has plans to restore this building on the basis that Roxburgh was a Scotsman around the world. So there is Roxburgh's house. Now, at the gardens, Roxburgh needed to record all the plants so the East India Company could identify and use them for medical and commercial purposes. But flowers get squashed. They lose their color over time, and they are very fragile. Nature does not look like nature when it's dead. So he had to get them drawn as well. Roxburgh employed a team of Indian artists at the Botanic Garden to record systematically all the plants. Here's an example. On the left is the butterfly pea plant. In the middle is the plant pressed. You may have done this yourself as a child, maybe even as an adult. Press the plant. And on the right is the drawing that Roxburgh had made of the plant over 200 years ago. Through this meeting of art and science, therefore, knowledge of the natural world could be shared across the world. But Roxburgh was not the first person to do this in India, not even in Calcutta. Other colonial officials who Roxburgh knew created similar collections